Is that what
All
Dad
right.
did?
We are live.
Not my dad.
Mine either.
It is February 20th, 2025. This is Off the Record with Brian Hart. I am Brian Hart. I have an amazing tech panel lined up today. We're going to do quick introductions and jump right in. I've got Sarah Evans, partner and head of PR at Zen Media, Tyrone Ross, founder and CEO at Turnqey Labs, and I've got Nicole Casperson, author of, here's the plug, Fintech Feminists.
Woo!
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to jump right into what's going on at Meta. They just announced a big wave of layoffs. They are not the only big tech company announcing layoffs now. What blew up on LinkedIn when this story broke wasn't even necessarily the layoffs, which was a big story. I mean, 5% of their workforce is huge, impacts a lot of people. But the manner in which they did it, branding this 5% that was just let go as the low performers, that became a big discussion point on LinkedIn and everywhere else. Nicole, I want to lead in with you. When you saw that news and how they broke that news, what was your reaction?
I mean, I constantly go back to all of the weird beta energy that's going on at the top of the food chain over at these big tech companies. Honestly, these layoffs, right, are correlating with the fact that they're disbanding their DEI, right? The DEI teams, they're like eliminating equity and inclusion in training programs entirely. Honestly, I see this as, like I said, a bunch of grown men acting with a lot of beta energy. So I think from a positive perspective, folks that are laid off from big tech companies like Meta have the opportunity to leverage that logo, whatever it means now these days, to possibly enter in a better position at a startup, right? At a fintech company, at a tech company, and have a better go at working at a place that, you know, maybe hasn't totally contributed to the terrible addiction that is social media and the hurt that has been caused because of social media's impact on women, on young girls, on people in general. Anyways, but that's my immediate take is look, positive spin, leave that place because it's nutso anyway. And who wants to work for someone like Zuck? And go somewhere where you can leverage the clout of working at a place like Meta or any of these big tech companies and go somewhere with some real values.
And Sarah, from a PR perspective, I mean, the manner in which they announced it, how they handled it. I mean, was there any benefit to Meta in announcing it that way? What's your takeaway?
No, is the short answer. I mean, to label an entire percentage of your workforce as low performer really just, number one, like, how did you hire so many low performers then? Why were you letting them work so long? That's, you know, my initial thought. But secondarily, I love that these folks took initiative and said, I'm not going to own that title. And I'm going to tell you what I did. I was reading a friend of mine who was laid off. She was on maternity leave, came back and was like, all of a sudden, I thought I was going to be labeled as maternity leave for my review. And I was labeled as low performer and let go. There's a huge disconnect there. And frankly, they can take back their narrative. I'm not even looking at it from the Meta perspective. I'm looking at it really from the folks who are let go. And Nicole, like you were saying, it's a feather in their cap to have worked there. They can use that. And now I'm looking at what's going to happen to the workforce. All these amazing folks who are likely not low performers are going to help take other organizations to the next level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there's a lot of merit-based hiring going on, obviously, over there.
So, I mean, I want to play devil's advocate a little bit. I mean, there are low performers at almost any organization. They're especially, I mean, you know, after COVID and we had the whole great resignation, you had people going on LinkedIn bragging about quiet quitting, people bragging about doing just enough to not get fired or pretending, you know, building this mirage that they are a productive worker when they knew they were already mentally checked out. I mean, Tyrone, when you see this, how much do you think the way that they announced it is maybe pent up frustration from some of these big corporate leads who had dealt with quiet quitting and had dealt with, I mean, you know, job hopping being glorified on places like LinkedIn?
I don't think it's pent up demand or frustration from that. I think it's pent up frustration from around the 2020 timeframe, and the pendulum going all the way back to these companies with their lighthearted changing of their icons to Black Lives Matter and all this other stuff. And even DEI. I said DEI from the beginning was a half-hearted effort by the industry. It was never defined, and that's why you're seeing the backlash at it now. I never was a fan of it because it was never, what does the D and the E and the I stand for? So I think that's what you're seeing. I think you're seeing a pushback on that. So now it's easy, due to the changes in administration and where we are now with the pendulum going the other way, to let go of people. And I agree with everything that was said thus far. Yes, are there low performers in every company? As a CEO myself, yes, you have to get rid of low performers. I've talked to friends of mine that run companies and want to get rid of low performers. But make no mistake, this is not about people leaving companies. This is a direct result of what happened with George Floyd and Black Lives Matter and all that other stuff. The pendulum is completely swung the other way. There is a clear directive now in undertones of that it's okay to do these things, and it's off with the heads. And unfortunately, there are going to be a lot of people that are indirectly hurt by that. And yeah, there were probably some people that were hiding in the corner, right? Like not doing their job. That's fair, but let's not act like what's happening here is happening. And it is directly correlated to what happened 5 years ago, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And so on last month's show, we talked about specifically at Meta, them announcing the new content policies. They're adapting a lot of what X is doing as far as content moderation. As soon as I saw that headline break, as soon as I saw Zuckerberg with his hair grown out, making that video, announcing all these big changes, I went on X and said, layoffs are going to be next. I mean, he's not saying it out loud, but clearly that is going to be the next step, because that's exactly what Elon Musk did at X. When he reformed their content moderation policies, was he took a hacksaw to the workforce, and we knew it was coming with Zuck. Sarah, I want to go back to you because, I mean, you know, it felt like, you know, I threw out the theory, maybe a little bit of it's pent up frustration from employers, but also, I mean, is it, you know, a little bit of PR cover saying, okay, yeah, we're refining it, we want more efficient workers. So we are eliminating the low performers to be more efficient. Again, some of it might be valid. Some of it's probably completely invalid and just PR spin. But what's your takeaway from that?
I mean, I can say what, you know, with my experience working with enterprise tech companies, there is a narrative component. When you're planning something like this, everything that is done from day one of announcement, from actually 3 months before when you just gave the playbook, first X happens, no pun intended, then Y happens. That's what we were seeing. And the narratives were very much constructed before going out. I mean, if we think that those teams didn't think about the backlash coming in, I would highly doubt that they didn't think about that and have many different scenarios played out on how to respond to that, because that's what an elite PR comms team would be doing. So yes, it was, they're getting out in front. You know, we always kind of joke, if you're being run out of town, jump in front and call it a parade. And that's what we're seeing.
Mm-hmm. And I would say another component to this conversation, you know, now we're getting these big layoff announcements at big tech companies. But before that, we had the convincing people to voluntarily remove themselves, where they were able to avoid these negative headlines that come with layoffs. And that was return to office, RTO. Those policies were implemented in full force with a lot of big brand names beyond tech. But that RTO, I saw it as a downsizing motive. It's just a way of downsizing, eliminating RTO, eliminating so many of the other perks that workers had enjoyed during the post-COVID and COVID/post-COVID period, ripping them away all at once. You know you're going to lose a portion of your workforce. And Nicole, I want to kick this to you because, you know, eliminating RTO and some of those perks, it had an outsized adverse effect on women in these tech companies, in my opinion.
Facts. Yeah, no, that is factual. That of course, when you remove any type of workplace flexibility, the person that it's going to impact most is going to be women, moms, people of color, women of color. So yeah, I'm not a mom yet, but I work with moms and my chief of staff's a mom. And Sarah, if you're a mom, speak to that. Cause yeah, and that's, at the end of the day, the fact that we don't have adequate workplace policies for moms, and the fact that we don't even have basic financial services or even caregiving policies in place for moms essentially means that we're year over year over year always just leaving money on the table to be able to actually leverage the power of moms in the economy, right? I believe that's around you're looking at like a $10 trillion deficit that you're not even tapping into because of the fact that moms cannot even properly be a part of the workforce. So that's one. On the other side of it, if I'm gonna then swing back to the part where I am a overwhelming optimist, is what happened during the pandemic, and that effect on what happened to women, to moms, is that they actually jumped into entrepreneurship more, right? So we've actually seen the wave of more women entering entrepreneurship, saying, you know what, forget it. Like, I'm not going to work these corporate policies anymore, and I'm just going to go build my own. Obviously, at this point with technology, being an entrepreneur, that door is open and a bit more accessible than ever before. Hey, digital entrepreneur right here. And so that is the other avenue, right? If we could see more waves of women becoming entrepreneurs, with the flip side of that, them actually having the resources and tools and access that they need to grow, scale, and be successful in that endeavor, then that's one way to actually bring that cohort into the workforce in a way that benefits them. And as we know, entrepreneurship's the real way to build any wealth in this world. So there's my positive spin on such a thing.
Love that, Nicole. I mean, I literally started my company 16 years ago on the very catalyst of becoming a mom. I was like, I don't fit anymore. I can't make this work for me. And I have a lot to offer. And ironically, you know who I hired the most? Moms.
Moms. They're mine. My whole team, outside of my co-founder, who's also my life partner, my other two teammates are both moms. You want to get something done? Hire a mom.
Hire a mom.
Obviously.
I need a whole team. Brian.
So beyond, we talked about the headlines, how this wave of layoffs is being talked about. I want to throw this out there and anybody can jump in. I mean, what are you seeing that's driving these layoffs, specifically in tech? But as we know, as we've seen big waves of layoffs in tech, typically there's a lot of other industries that follow suit. And we're seeing it with the employment numbers that have been coming out. And, this economy, while somewhat stable, I mean, is showing some vulnerability right now, especially in the job market. What are all the driving factors to what we're seeing playing out in tech and then more broadly with the job market?
I mean, I can jump in just on kind of the bloat issue without taking into account anything else that is happening. When you're just looking at like the integrity of corporate structure, there are some positions that maybe are not that AI is taking jobs, but things that have been eliminated. For example, in our own agency, we eliminated account coordinators. It's just not a role that is necessary anymore. It was creating barriers and layers, and we have other workflows, AI agents. We've got different flows that can take the place of that. So, that's one example. We have a client who is a robotics company, and the area of the warehouse logistics infrastructure that they're overtaking, immediately reporters were like, well, is this taking jobs? And then when you look at the most injury prone, highest turnover rate, lowest job satisfaction area of the warehouse, it's this area. So they're not really replacing jobs. They're helping upskill people who previously had to work in inclement conditions, in now giving them robotic skills. So, I mean, there's the PR spin, but that's just one example.
Well, and I want to jump in now with my experience, because what you said about that PR coordinator position, I had written many articles and I had preached to my staff for years. I said, listen, a lot of these mundane, non-client facing, non-media facing tasks, they're all going to be replaced. Okay, these universities need to teach these young people how to confidently be public facing, being client facing, and whatnot. Yeah. And I knew those tasks were going to get automated. Yeah. And they have been. Yeah. I have no need for an account coordinator right now. even an intern, I mean, it would need to be a very specified task that can't be done better and faster by AI. And those tasks are becoming fewer and fewer. So, I mean, if you cannot be confident on the phone with a client, if you cannot be confident on the phone with the media, you probably just aren't going to be a fit in PR.
Well, and on the flip side, not to hone on our industry, but when you look at really large PR agencies who are doing layoffs, they're also eliminating anyone who doesn't have a direct touch to securing media. Those are my executive roles that have, they're like, I'm too big, I don't pitch. I will never not be pitching. It is my weight in gold. I'm the head of PR. I'm a partner. It doesn't matter. I'm always pitching. I don't want to lose that skill, because at the end of the day, what's most valuable and viable to the people hiring us? Can you get us in the press or keep us out of the press?
Tyrone, I mean, where are you seeing downsizing? We talked about tech, and you can certainly elaborate on that, but what else are you seeing? and what's driving it? What are the factors you're hearing about and seeing?
Here's what I would say as a tech entrepreneur, and then also I like to wear two hats, right? Tech entrepreneur and also a financial advisor. On the tech side, the last 3 weeks or so has completely changed software as we know it. Every company has to be refounded. If you're using AI, you're not using it enough. And it is unreal, the changes that, like even Grok 3 the other night, I was up playing with Grok 3 after it was released. It's a game changer, right? I was talking to an investor of mine. He was a big advisor at Carson. And he was like, a financial plan that would have took me 3 months, I did in 3 hours, which was his own on Grok, given it all these different scenarios and everything else, right? So that is just essentially going to squeeze people out. And again, you're looking at roles, call centers, things like that, people that were just in a company that could be phased out. But again, to Nicole's thing of being an optimist, I think the soft skills, however we're labeling it, emotional intelligence, whatever these days, right? The ability
interpersonal,
to humanize experience, right? To talk to people, to provide a service or wow moments, I think have gone sky high. Same thing with advisors providing personalized advice and value in real time, not when I talk to you 3 months later, but in real time, because we have data that we're able to track. So I think I was talking to a CEO of a fairly large company last week, and he was like, we are 450 plus people. And he's like, I got people that are hiding. Like, we just don't need that. I'm going to have to let go because we just don't need that many people to do what we need to do. So I think it's going to be across all industries. I think everyone is exploring ways where they could use this to get a little bit more efficient and lean. But again, I think if you flip it around, it's how do we use AI if I'm a content creator, if I'm an entrepreneur, if I'm a mom, if I'm whatever it is, to my advantage to start the creator economy for myself and get that growing. So I just think you're going to see a shift from one pocket to the other, because I think a lot of people that have been in companies for a long time and phased out, if they're smart, now you know how a company works. You know what's important. You know, you're able to look at it and say, okay, well, this is what I can do on my own. And the last thing I'll say is this. I say it to both of my teams. I say it to my mentees. I say it to other founders I advise. Here's the thing that, and this is not dependent on AI or color or background or race or sex or nothing. You got to wake up every day and look in the mirror and go, if I wasn't to show up to work today, will they know? Right? Mm-hmm. Like if that answer is not clear, then you should be a little concerned, right? Like, and that's just the truth, right? And I think go ahead. So to me, that's the biggest question that I think everyone should be asking themselves right now.
Mm-hmm. I would say that to jump on Tyrone's point, then that really justifies the need for personal branding, right? Honestly, it's something that at my days at Investment News continue to seem farther and farther away as the years go by. But I did really, really try to push that narrative, and often was looked at like, oh, Nicole, that's so cute that you think that financial advisors should create content and have a narrative and like share their story. And anyway, I think that's funny that we're looking all these.
Now, Nicole, who's laughing now?
Yeah, exactly. Who's laughing now? Who's laughing now? Exactly. Like peace and love. But anyways, that's what you're looking at, right? So okay, so let's say if your tasks and these more the technical skills, right, are able to be automated because of AI, then to Tyrone's point, you're looking at more interpersonal skills, people actually being able, when you're saying talk on the phone, I'm a millennial, but I know a lot of Gen Zers as a young person. And so I'm just thinking of the sheer fear in my social media manager's eyes if I ever asked her to pick up the phone and make a phone call. She's like, absolutely not. But she can, look at 5 things on the internet at the same time somehow, right, and engage. So, how do you kind of leverage these different skills to get that type of demographic interested in being more interpersonal? Honestly, it's through personal branding. That's something that they are open to. They're okay with. They're afraid to pick up the phone. They have no problem sharing their vulnerabilities on social media, right? In a post, in a story, in LinkedIn. That, I think, is that additional wave of employees looking more towards people's LinkedIn profiles or their social presence as a way of saying, you know what, this is someone worth hiring because, yes, they have the technical skills, great, they went to whatever Ivy League, whatever, they worked at Meta, whatever it is, but do they have that additional layer of promise or of value proposition, right? Because they are strong standing on their own. To be fair, that organization has to be okay with that. I've known a lot of creators, people with strong personal brands who work at larger companies and they have a hard time with it. So that's like another layer of where we're going to have to go, is people being okay with that and people prioritizing that and people not seeing it as something silly or frivolous or vain, right? Like there's truly nothing more powerful than actually sharing your story and what you're going through and what's going on. And I think we've seen, I was on the show last time a few years back with Sam Russell. I mean, what a phenomenal example of someone who's just opened up and shown us so much and value, gives us so much value up top, and look at how much she thrives from that. But companies need to be okay with that. And yeah, that's that there.
Nicole, I just want to add a life pro tip coming from a mom. I make my children make phone calls. Yesterday, my 13-year-old had to call our dogs for grooming appointments. That is one of his chores because I want my kids to have interpersonal skills. And as silly as it is, it starts at the very micro home level. So they have to make phone calls.
Sarah, you and my dad are on the same wavelength because my dad did that to me since I was a kid. Like we'd be at the airport and he'd be like, "Hey, can you go up to the gate and ask when our flight's gonna board?" And I'd be like, "Dad, it says it right there. Why are you making me do this?" But it worked, right? I mean, look how much I talk to people now.
He knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
So I want to pivot a little bit, and this is the perfect pivot because we're branching right off of the conversation that we had. Nicole, I love that you brought up the LinkedIn Live that you and I and Sam Russell did a couple of years ago, because I remember something you said during that conversation. We were talking about the financial advice industry. We were talking about AI, and you said, "Can AI do what a financial advisor can do? I hope not." That's what you said. 2 years later, do you still believe that?
I wonder why I said I hope not.
Yeah.
I wonder what I meant. Honestly, I
should have loaded the clip. I should have had that loaded, ready to replay.
I know, after I just made fun of the other past selves of me. Anyway, so yeah, I would say that it depends on obviously context. So in terms of the personal connection and element that more folks want from a financial advisor or from anything really, obviously no AI is capable of replicating that. But everything else is cool. Why not make a plan as fast as possible? Why not be able to go in and personalize it? Go ahead.
And I wanted to bring that up in the context of some big news stories that have broken this week and over the past couple of weeks. We had DeepSeek come out and completely shatter what people believed AI was and the expense that needed to be behind it, having these massive chips and everything powering it. DeepSeek figured out a way to have very quality AI at a very low cost. We saw a reaction in the markets. We saw a reaction everywhere when this came out. People freaked out. This week we had Microsoft unveil their quantum chip to compete with the one Google released a couple months ago. That's a big deal. I mean, this technology is growing at just breakneck pace. Tyrone, I want to kick it back to you. I mean, seeing some of the big developments, it feels like every few weeks we have a world-changing technology emerge, or a new iteration of world-changing technology that's way better than the previous. What are you seeing? How are you keeping up? You can touch on the financial advice component. Take it wherever you want to take it.
Yeah, it's not weeks, it's days at this point. Like I said, if you in the last 3 weeks, it's completely changed. Every company needs to be, I had to literally rebuild both of my companies in the last 3 weeks. It is nonstop testing, trying. The minute you build to something, you got to build to something else, right? It is insane. My the CTO of Turnqey, my crypto data company, wrote algorithms for the military to still use today. He's been doing AI, machine learning, all this stuff for a long time. And he's blown away about the pace of these things. So as far as that, I think this is severely underestimated. One, from anyone that is doing any type of job, but especially in software and technology, you have to be on top of this. And if you're using it, you're not using it enough. The social justice warrior of me, of concern for people who look like me. I don't use people of color no more. It's Black Americans, and like we got, that's a whole nother conversation. But for Black Americans in this country, I'm concerned, and especially for Black boys who have very low literacy rates and not exposed to this technology, right? So for Black Americans and African Americans, I think that's a very big issue. And I think for other minorities, which I will say, I think it's a big issue, because we got to make sure folks are exposed to this and what it's going to mean for their families. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and the investor, it was a big time AI investor at Sequoia. And he said, the first thing I did was talk to my wife and said, let's make sure our kids are prepared. And that resonated with me, because if you don't know that these things are out there, you're not preparing your family, right? And I'm very concerned about the underclass, or the caste system that we have in this country, that don't get exposed to these things and move it forward. So that's what I'm really concerned with. On the financial advice side, we're advice only firm. And I think for advice only firms that get paid for giving our advice, it's literally the roaring 20s, right? Because the technology is going to give you really cool insights and data and really cool things to say, and your advice becomes more valuable. But doing plans and running, all these that's over. It's done, right? They could do that on their own. But your ability to sit in front of someone and give them advice, I think, is something that is very powerful, and something that I think, as financial advice and wealth management starts to grow, you're really going to see the value of financial planning and advice go up, and then all of the goofy technology stuff that advisors always trip over go down.
Mm-hmm. And Sarah, I mean, I know you work with tech firm, not just fintech. I mean, you've worked broadly with tech for many, many years, all different types of companies. I mean, with these new emerging technologies, or at least new iterations of game-changing technology, what are the biggest storylines you're seeing and following?
I mean, that's such a big, loaded question, Brian. I was actually just taking notes while Tyrone was talking about, I'm always looking for ways to give our clients advice, right? And prepare for things. And one of the things you just triggered in me, Tyrone, I know this kind of hits at your question, Brian, this concept of the roaring 20s. I think we're seeing that across all of tech. And one of my takeaways today is, when you're planning a launch or an announcement, there's probably 20 other companies doing the same, either something bigger, better, badder, and you have to be ready to pivot, change, rebuild, recalibrate. So the trends are really that. Like, when we're pitching media right now, it is much harder to get in traditional media for a whole host of reasons, including layoffs. But if we use terms like game changing first, any of the things that when we were like coming up, I mean, I've been in the industry for 20 years now. So when we were first coming up, to be first at something was a real feather in your cap. Now it's completely one of those discerning terms. Everyone's like, what? You're probably not first, and don't use that term. So we're having to repackage and re-strategize just how media are getting things, because I have to assume they're getting 100 other, similar inbounds every day. So trends for me is just like the roaring 20s. It's every day. I don't even know that when I'm doing my media strategy every morning, I'm looking at that day's trends. I'm looking at LinkedIn headlines. I'm looking at Apple News headlines. I'm looking at what's trending on Reddit on the popular page. And I'm using my AI prompts to bring those all together and give me ideas for the current news cycle. So that's how I'm gauging trends. I'm not even looking at it in weeks or months right now. It's day to day.
Wow.
So
sorry, I'm like,
yeah, all things.
No, I'm like, it's so true that like the amount of, I get it, like the amount of change that is happening rapidly as someone who writes a newsletter twice a week, with the responsibility, if you will, right, of informing my audience of what's going on. It is like everything you just said about kind of like how you're distilling everything in the media. It's it's a lot to be able to. I think one of the things that grounds me is always thinking of my ICP, right? Always thinking of my core audience, always thinking, cool, well, what piece of content or what storyline is the most important and impactful to my audience, largely being women in fintech, to the point of also just learning about the pace of these technologies, something that also keeps me grounded, especially as a young person learning every day, is ensuring that I'm following the work of people who I believe have the values and the ethics and the beliefs that I do. Because at the end of the day, the thing, and I wrote about this in my book, Fintech Feminists, AI and all the tech changes, it's really, really cool and shiny and fascinating and wee-hoo, but like, unless women or different kinds of individuals are the ones actually leading the conversation and leading the narrative, and the ones that we're following, and and making sure you're listening to Dr. Fifi Lee or Dr. Latanya Sweeney or Dr. Daphne Kohler or any of the incredible women out there and researchers who are AI experts, paying attention to them, learning from them, reading their work, understanding the industry from a different perspective instead of always reading whatever the hell Elon Musk has to say, is one way to have a completely different perspective, education, learning experience on the tech trends that are happening. Diversify where you're getting your information from. Media literacy is real and necessary.
I want to get back to a point that Tyrone brought up. Talking about young Black adolescents not getting the right kind of education when we're still struggling just with literacy. In certain areas of the country. I'm here in Philadelphia. It's a big problem. The education system is not where it needs to be here, and people are underprivileged and starting their lives once they get that diploma from high school, if they even make it that far, starting their lives at a disadvantage because they didn't get a quality education that you need to compete in this type of landscape, especially when technology is just so rapidly. I mean, us as business people can barely keep up, for a teenager, just trying to learn basic life skills. It's a real challenge. Now, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, I would have said every, second grader should start learning coding. Now I've kind of pivoted on that because coding's going to be obsolete. The AI is going to be doing AI is already doing a lot of the coding for us these days. So what type of education, what type of skill set should, high school adolescents or young adults in college be focused on to compete for the next 5 years, let alone 10, 20 years?
So here's the thing. You still should learn how to code, but we got to give kids creativity and imagination, because now AI is going to give you the ability to build whatever you want. So we have to imbue in all children possibility. Right? We have to imbue in them the power to be creative and think outside the box. Right? We have to foster the ability for them to challenge their own assumptions and to challenge adults in a respectful way and allow them to grow in that and then to go home and be able to talk to an AI and build whatever it is that they see. So I still think coding is going to be important. I think generally now, here's the thing, right? Independent of how you feel about the new administration, what is allowed now is the veil is off. We know exactly what the cover of America looks like and what is underneath. Thank you, Kendrick Lamar. But the whole point is this: the racists, misogynists, and bigots are calling out data and stats that, okay, it is what it is. And one of those, which is why I'm leaning into that so much, is the low IQ rates for Black people as a race, and that little Black boys can't read, and all these other things I was saying a long time ago, and they bring you in to talk about it, but don't really want to deal with it at a surface level. I have a bunch of mentees that are living in Philadelphia, and the text thread, if I was to share that, would break people's hearts of what goes on there. So I say this: What we know now is what's being called out again by the misogyny, the racism, the bigotry, all these other things. But now as communities, we need to look inward and say, all right, well, how do we affect these things? All children were impacted by what happened with COVID, right? But now there were certain segments of the community that couldn't afford these little bubble groups that they had and hiring a teacher and all that stuff. And these kids are woefully behind. So conversations like this, if everyone's going to be honest now and all the masks are off and we could be honest, then let's be honest about what some of the issues are. I'm fine with that. Everyone take your corner, but let's be honest. Like, let's just look at redlining. Let's look at the impact of Jim Crow. Let's look at where Jim Crow came from and minstrel shows and all these other things and how that impacts things today. Let's just be honest about it. Feel how you want to feel. So now I think all I want is this for every kid in this country, independent of race, color, zip code, wherever, give them the ability to dream, to imagine, to aspire, to want to. As long as we do that, I think we've all done our jobs as parents, as uncles, as fathers, as brothers, as sisters, as CEOs, entrepreneurs, or whatever else. Every kid now, because of the technologies, they should be able to imagine. If I want to, they should ask an AI, if I want to be a president, how do I do that? The kid in the lowest of ghettos should be able to do that. The kid that's up in the house in the hills. That should be independent of whoever their parents are, where they go to school, or whatever else. And that's what I care about. And we're free now. There's no more hiding, right? But our kids should not be infected by the disease, the people who want to take a side. That crap is over. You want to be divided, cool, but not our children, right? Because you see kids, they play in the park. They don't care about all these constructs that we created. So those kids should be able to get together and, man, we don't want to live in the world that our parents live in. How do we create a world of our own? How do we build our own ecosystems and learning tools and communities where we feel comfortable being ourselves? Pink hair, gray hair, fat, skinny, black, tall, short, who cares? That's where I think I'm sorry, I'm off my soapbox right now, but to me, that is the most important thing that could happen with all this stuff that's happened now, because the veil is off. We know what America is. Let's stop pretending, but let's not infect our children with that virus. I'm just not going to allow it personally.
Tyrone, I want to add to that, just from a woman in tech perspective. I get a lot of folks who come to me about protecting their children from tech. Like, there's the whole other side of people are scared because of what's happening. In my philosophy, both in my parenting and how I approach everything with children, is let them be little. I always say that, and maybe that gets at some of the magic and creativity and opportunity to dream. But there's also the side where I'm working one-on-one with parents who have had horrible things happen because their children had too much access and the parents didn't know. And, the literacy, it's like children deserve the opportunity to learn, and also helping educate their parents on how to be good partners and stewards with them. And so that crossover is something just as a personal mission, and something I do usually just on a one-to-one basis. But I know that there's just opportunity there. When my son comes to me and says, "Mom, can I get on TikTok?" and I say no, and he says, "I'm the only one of my friends not on it," I said, "Good, I'm winning."
Yeah,
proud mom moment.
Yeah, guardrails for sure. But again, I think there's nothing that has ever been created in the world has not been co-opted and used for evil, like woke or DEI, all those things, right?
Yeah.
And you gave me a layup of a pivot into the next topic I wanted to get to as well, because with how rapidly this technology is emerging, there are threats that are very real that businesses big and small have to worry about. Tyrone, you knew we were not getting through an entire show without me bringing up my Philadelphia Eagles. I was at the parade celebration, the Super Bowl parade celebration, and a drone interrupted Jalen Hurts' speech. A drone was parked right in front of his head while he's trying to give a speech. They were everywhere. Drone technology is just one part of all the technology that we're talking about. And clearly drone technology is being paired and partnered with, AI and everything else with what they're doing with that technology. Is the technology growing too fast? Are humans responsible enough to, with this arms race between Google and Microsoft and everyone else trying to get the next best thing, using AI to develop the next technology? Are humans responsible enough? Are there emerging cyber threats or societal threats that are on the near horizon? I mean, when I look at it, I'm a big believer, science fiction from 20 years ago is typically the present. And that's exactly the world that I see emerging right now. Science fiction from 5-10 years ago is now the present. Are we moving too fast? Tyrone, you can jump back in. Sarah, Nicole, I want to open this up. What should we be scared of right now?
So
or should we be scared?
I'm showing my age here, but when I grew up, there was a cartoon, The Jetsons, right? And,
Yes.
right? Like the Jetsons still around, but it's like we're living in the Jetsons now. Like it's crazy some of the things that is happening. But all I'll say is this: as I was just to finish on that point, it's tough. I feel like we are. If we had the right leadership in place that was understanding of putting a blanket over this, and again, making sure it's equally, I know it's a tough word to say in America, equal, but equally distributed, right? And access to equitable. Ooh, another one that hurts. Golly, equity. So I do think we are, but here's the thing. The gatekeepers have to make sure that they're using their voice to do exactly what you said, that it is responsible, that if AI is reading the eyes, I saw something the other day, AI can read your eyeballs now and tell whether you're a man or a woman, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and then like, imagine when all these things are used for hiring and everything else and so on and so forth. But then you go, oh, well, maybe if AI is just scanning resumes and my name is Amber Abdullah, like my niece she works in HR, right? She ran a set of experiments on Amber McLeod and Amber Abdullah. Guess who got more responses? McLeod.
Yeah.
Right. So it's those type of things. So anyway, I just think the gatekeepers need to understand the responsibility here. Those are at the forefront of it. Those that have the privilege of sitting here in the middle of the day and have this conversation. It's incumbent on us to make sure that we're using our voice, which is the most powerful tool you have. It's not AI. Mm-hmm. It's your personal brand that Nicole talked about. Are you willing to put your personal brand on the line? I promise it's the last thing I'm going to add to this conversation. Here's why. I was talking to, Nicole knows who this person is. I'll spare names. He's a very notable writer in the fintech space. And him and I had a conversation. We were catching up. And he's a gay man. And he's struggling now with how he feels his lifestyle is going to be impacted with the recent events of the last couple of months, whatever. He said he leaned on another big figure industry friend of his. Say, hey, can you help me out here? I'm trying to navigate this. Where do I go next? And this gentleman that he's built big businesses with, made millions of dollars for and with, said, nah, won't help you. Can't help you. I just can't. I can't take the risk. I can't spend my soul. Oh. And he was heartbroken. And to me, it's that I'm talking about. We can't afford the people that have those mega voices and those things to turn away and go, you're on your own, right? So especially with this, because it is going to impact a lot of people. Layoffs, as we talked about, security issues, surveillance issues of people just, you're never going to have a shot if we know before you even got to the door for whatever it is that you're here for, a mortgage, a car, a job, care, whatever. We don't serve your kind. We just don't. Sorry. So I think we need to use our voice for that. But again, that's how I feel about it. The gatekeepers got to stick up here, and I don't think too many of them will. But those of us that have that in our DNA, we have to stick up for making sure those type of things don't happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tyrone, I think you're right. You have to be, if you have the privilege of using your voice and it not costing you your safety, then that is a must, right? For me and my audience, I get a lot of, I'll do a talk or a podcast or a LinkedIn Live like this. And I did one just yesterday where a lot of the women responding to what I had to say, I was talking about my book. They were like, oh, since all the things with DEI, since the election, since everything, I felt really down and really like ready to just kind of call it, right? Like not be a part of the conversation, just kind of step away. Honestly, especially for the older women in the space, I can understand that sentiment because they've been at this for so much longer. But to be honest, like when the election happened, the reason, like I was upset for many reasons, but the thing that really made me stand up straight the next day and keep going no matter what wasn't thinking about, just myself, but thinking about Maxine Waters, thinking about Gloria Steinem, thinking about my 84-year-old mother-in-law, thinking about these women who have been at it for their entire careers. And you know what? They might not see the day that we have the proper leadership in place, but I will never, how dare I not continue their work? How dare I not put everything I've got into making sure that what they gave their lives to and their legacy to continues to stand on. That's what I create with my content. That's what I create with the Fintech is Femme Leadership Summit, happening April 23rd, by the way, in New York City. So if you want to be there, be there. We're also actually hosting the first ever Fintech Security Summit. So speaking of security, right? At the same venue on a second stage on April 23rd. So if anyone's interested in that, hit me up. But to the point of, we're never going to have the security, we're never going to have the safety that is necessary and needed if we're not having the leadership in place that actually has the experiences to solve those problems. So that's like the world that we're kind of looking at in terms of the bro-oligarchy that is currently in place right now. But every single massive change, every single movement, anything that's ever happened has happened because a small group of people decided to make some noise and decided to keep going and decided to keep building and decided to commune and congregate and build community and find safety in their numbers and push forward. So that to me is the way we continue this. Is build. This is a time when they want us to play small. That's exactly what they want you to do, is play small, bow out, stop talking about it, and be annoyed and be overwhelmed. And how much can I swear on this show? But anyways, forget that. Like, okay, it's like 18, yeah. But like, forget that. Absolutely not. Like, this is the time to be bigger, especially for women. This is the time to like grow, use that voice, right, that you have, be willing to share the vulnerabilities and the stories and the risks that you're going to take, make big calls on big bets, and do it if not for yourself, if for the people that don't have the privilege of doing such a thing. Anyways,
Nicole, I love that you said that, because it is so important, especially, now that I'm in an executive role, I rose through the ranks. It's more important. I'm in the position where I can get people to the table, or I can include people as you are, Tyrone, as you are, Brian. So it's so important that we do that out, not just on this show, but anybody who is in a position where you can bring someone to the table. And it may seem silly and small, but at the end of every presentation, when I speak, my last slide is always, find someone who doesn't look like you and get them a seat at the table. It's my call to action. Yeah. In every presentation, I will get, if you're listening and you want the slide, I'll give it to you. But it's how can you take that action and repeat it in everyday scenarios, because that's where it starts to make a difference. The third thing I wanted to say, Brian, your initial question was, is tech moving too fast? Find me one thing since the history of humanity that wasn't making a lot of money that didn't move too fast. And we're down that playbook path right now. So that's my answer to that. Tyrone and Nicole, I've learned so much from both of you, and really I've got a whole page of notes. So thank you.
Of course.
And I want to keep the conversation right here, because I promised at the beginning we were going to talk a little bit more about Nicole's book, Fintech Feminists. Nicole, start off, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, but I mean, why this book and why right now?
Yeah. Anyways, how much time we got? We got a few minutes left. Okay, so so I mean, I wrote it last year. No idea what was going to happen. In fact, I thought I'm young enough to be and wildly optimistic enough to think things were going to turn out wildly different. But regardless of the outcome of what's going on right now, I wrote Fintech Feminists because there is a narrative out there that women don't belong in fintech, finance, tech industries. There's a narrative out there that we, and obviously some of these elements are true, right? That we're underrepresented, that we only receive 2% of funding. All of that, we're spendthrifts. We don't invest. All of these narratives that play into how we present ourselves and create and build and innovate in this world. I wanted to write a book that showcased that every single one of those things is just not true. So through a number of different profiles of different women building wildly successful companies in the fintech space. There's actually about 40 of them in the book, so someone to resonate with throughout the story. You're seeing the different personal stories that lead to the business models that lead to the success, because from my point of view, your story equals your leadership and that equals your success. And if you're able to hone in on that story, then that is going to be a greater catapult to your success. So I wanted to create a blueprint for women to see, to follow, and to learn, and to lead. And realize that at the end of the day, there's a section in the book in there called The Women Who Opened Up the Doors, who kicked open the doors. And it's very, very important for women to remember that these false narratives are just that, false. Women have built the rails of the finance industry since the very beginning. Maggie Walker, right? First Black woman to have to open up a bank in the United States. You have Ada Lovelace, the first coder, right? Literally like in the 1800s. Grace Hopper, right? Created Cobble. The rails of fintech were built by women. And so for us to sit here and not build on the legacy of basically our ancestors, right? The narrative doesn't add up. So anyway, so I wrote a book that challenges that entire narrative, that emphasizes the importance of feminist economics, that emphasizes the importance of having and following these blueprints for success, because they are out there and they are real. And frankly, I'm tired of hearing people say, I just don't see enough women. I just don't see enough women. Yeah, because of the media and the books that you're reading and the content that you're consuming. There are plenty out there. Their stories are just not being put out there by enough people. And I'm looking to change that.
Sarah, Tyrone, did you want to jump in with any questions or
Yeah,
comments?
I have two things that I want to add. I've been fortunate enough to have a front row seat of this young lady's ascendance in our space. And every opportunity I get, I tell her I cannot be more impressed with her fearlessness. And as someone who's brought his loved one, my niece, into this industry, I unfortunately brought her into the startup industry and the finance industry. So to have someone for her to look at as a North Star around that same time as Nicole was ascending to that spot is nothing short of astounding to me, not because she wasn't capable, but because our industry eats its own, and especially people who don't fit the mold. And to stand out, to use her voice, to liberate so many women, to be an inspiration to my niece, who I love more than life, to me, I think is something that needs to be said. She is an absolute joy. We need more of it. And I hope there are so many young girls that are inspired by her presence, which is everywhere. And I think that's what we need. And that's the whole thing I was telling everyone, is sometimes you just need to be exposed. I was exposed, which leads me to the next thing I want to say. The best leader, servant that I have ever come across was a woman. Her name was Lisa Craddock. And a lot of people don't know, I started my career in IR and PR at a firm called Financial Dynamics. So I have a very vast PR background. Every Women's Day, Women's Month, whatever, I shout her out on LinkedIn, because if it wasn't for Lisa Craddock, there is no Tyrone Ross. She took a chance on me. Before I got my first job, I was a juvenile probation officer. I had no reason to be on Wall Street at all. She took a chance on me, but not also did she take a chance on me, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Once she brought me in, I was the only Black man in the entire company. She hired me as a junior associate, and she challenged me to break the mold of what you think you are. And there was a story. I was also training for the Olympics at the time, and there was this big pitch with Under Armour. And they wanted to bring me in as kind of like the token, not only the token Negro, but also like the token athlete. She said, he's going to write the press release of when it goes out. We're going to close the business on our own. He's going to write the press release. She forced me to write the press release. I was like, wait a minute, I've never written the press release before. Not only did I write the press release, she sent an email to the entire company that said, we got a burgeoning star in our hands. She didn't see where I was now, but she saw where I was now. And she said, this young man is going to be something. So that advocacy, that exposure, and that fierce fight that I know she got, because we talked afterwards, from a bunch of very powerful men who told her, what are you doing? right? And then now she said, all I do now is direct them to your LinkedIn, right? And this was in 2008. She had no reason to give me the job. She had no reason to inspire me. She had no reason to keep giving me work. She had no reason to do it. She didn't know me from a can of paint. But she said, this is something here that we continue to do to this day. And I've come across some wonderful leaders, wonderful people. That woman changed my life. So I say that to say, to me, I think what Nicole is doing, when folks really look at the people that inspired them and allowed them to be there, it all in some way, it ties back to women that have empowered men, right? Wives who don't get credit, mothers who don't get credit, right? The little woman at the corner store who always had your coffee ready, whoever it is, there's a woman somewhere that you know, that allows you to be who you were. And not only did she give me the opportunity, but she also imbued in me the spirit to dare. It's okay to be you. Your name isn't too black. You aren't too. She. It's okay. I know. I got it. I know what you've been told. I know what. Dare to be, and because of her and because of books like this, I think these are the things that are going to usher in a new wave of wealth management and a new wave of leadership in this country, and that is why the results of the election showed. We're just not ready yet to have a woman lead this country, but guess what? It's gonna happen.
Right. Because they're leading in so many in so many other elements anyway. And of course they're having to attack it because women are gaining more wealth. We're owning more homes. We're taking over more of the workforce. We're entering entrepreneurship more. Like, of course there has to be a war on women when we're accelerating. They wouldn't attack us if there wasn't something to attack, right? If there wasn't some sort of power struggle to come at us. But to the point of ultimately the book just gives the credit where credit is due and opens up the opportunity for anyone, man, woman, whoever, to see that there's another blueprint for success to follow that is not Elon Musk, that is not Mark Zuckerberg, that is not this whatever that is over there. I don't know that life and I never had that. So this is what's going on over here in my corner of the universe. And I stand on business too. You know, these are wildly successful practices, business models, revenue streams, ways of going about creating and innovating in these spaces do not have to be a result of what we have seen, which is sure 2% of funding goes to female startup founders. I like to flip that number on its head. And the reality is that 98% of the time venture capitalists are funding the same one type of founder over and over again, and our economy implodes every 10 years, and they sit back and wonder what the hell happened. Well, I call that insanity.
So we've got a couple minutes left. Sarah, any questions, comments about the book, the themes we talked about?
You know, I love to listen. It doesn't always perform well when we're on a live talking podcast live show. Anecdotally, I will just share with both of you, my 13-year-old son is off school this week. They have an off week and I'm in calls all day. He doesn't really care. I saw him open my door while we were on the show. He poked his head in to listen while both you, Tyrone, and Nicole were talking. And I almost got weepy because I thought, this is what, be a fly on the wall, take this, absorb it. So I have lots of thoughts, but I also really love to learn. And I feel like I'm taking away a lot today. I'm very in the trenches in my industry. I mean, all day, every day, I work ethic. I'm from the Midwest. Like, our work ethic is through the roof. And I don't often get a chance to take a step back and look at, the bigger picture. And Nicole, watching from afar, watching your rise is amazing. Tyrone, I'm so happy to have, met you during this. Questions, I feel like I'm going to have 100 the next week or so. So get ready. Yeah. And Brian, great job putting this whole panel together.
Sarah Evans, I want to thank you, Tyrone Ross, Nicole Casperson, everybody who tuned in. If you only caught part of it, the entire episode will be uploaded everywhere where you get your podcasts. And make sure you tune in next week. We've got Nicole Schumann, Charlie Stone, Keisha Brewer. We're coming at you with big PR scandals to talk about. So check us out. Again, I want to thank everybody who participated, everybody who watched, and I know the four of us are going to take this offline, so we'll talk soon. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Bye.